everybody, what's going on? Slick D Gamer, Scott W. Perry here, and we've made it to episode 10 of Retro Chronicles, where we take a look at the history of WWF, WWE video games. And for this, we're about to say goodbye to the 8-bit era. In our last episode, we looked at Royal Rumble, one of the strongest games on there, and we're already seeing the future of video gaming. They're relying more on their 16-bit systems and beyond. When Super WrestleMania was covered in Nintendo Power, there was a story in that same magazine talking about CD-ROM technology. So it just kind of showed where things were going. The interesting thing is that the label that they were going to use for the CD-ROM was the Philips CDI, which became its own console, which now explains why there were Mario and Zelda games on it, but that's another story for another time. But it really showed how video gaming was heading to the future. But while it was heading for the future, in 1993, the Nintendo Entertainment System by then was 8 years old. It was on its way out, but there were still games being made for it and people who still liked it. And although Royal Rumble and Super WrestleMania were both big hits and sold a lot of copies, there was still room for one more game to come out for the NES and also for Game Boy. And it marked an interesting time also in WWE because at the same time, there was the big four pay-per-views. We had seen WrestleMania, we had seen Royal Rumble featured in the 16-bit market. So while they used that pay-per-view to market the 16-bit, they decided to go with a new concept to basically go around their last 8-bit game. And for that, they came up with a new pay-per-view called The King of the Ring. And in 1993, they focused it on the new generation and kind of shifting towards that and, you know, focusing on their new star that they were building on at the time, which for me turned out to be my all-time favorite. And what better way to kind of market it than have a game around it as well. So at the end of the 8-bit era, we got King of the Ring for Nintendo. Now, I'm going to be honest, this really isn't that good of a game. But they try to do some things with it that I thought were pretty interesting. Now, of course, with King of the Ring, you're going to have a King of the Ring tournament in it, which is their main moniker with it. You know, with this, they have only, you know, it's one-on-one matches. You have a tag team match, and then you have a King of the Ring. Now, there's 10 wrestlers in this game. There's actually 11 because for the first time since WrestleMania Challenge, returning to the match is you. That's right, you return as you, and you can play yourself in the King of the Ring. But I will admit, there are 10 wrestlers in this, and it kind of represents WWE well at the time. Ironically, it represents the pay-per-view a little bit good at the time, all right? Because, you know, some of the competitors in this were in the King of the Ring tournament. All right, so the 10 superstars who are in the game are Randy Macho Man Savage, Mr. Perfect, Bam Bam Bigelow, Shawn Michaels, Hulk Hogan, The Undertaker, the narcissist Lex Luger, Yokozuna, Razor Ramon, and the King of the Ring winner himself, Bret the Hitman Hart. Now, each wrestler has their own attributes. They have their own, you know, speed, skill, which, okay, looks good, makes sense, but it really doesn't apply in the game that well. It's mainly, what they tried to do with this one is they tried to emulate the 16-bit Super WrestleMania, Royal Rumble graphics and gameplay into an 8-bit system. The problem is that you have 6 buttons on the Super Nintendo when you only have 2 on here. So it doesn't really translate that well. The matches are kind of blah. The graphics are they look a little bit blocky and a little bit bulky. You know, I mean, at least they're bigger than they were in Steel Cage Challenge, but I wasn't too impressed with it. You know, the matches are a little bit long, a bit on the longest side. You don't really get to do much. Nobody has finishing moves. You know, but it does have the King of the Ring in it. There's a nice graphic if you win King of the Ring. But King of the Ring is just that. You have your 3 matches and that's it. You can't view the other matches. You can't see anything else that's there with it. But the 10 wrestlers, I think, are well represented for the system. And surprisingly, this is one of the rarer games you can get for this. You know, for the console. It actually sells, I think you can get a copy like this. I think it's worth about $150 now, which is good because I bought it for about 4 years ago. you know, and for me, for a completist sake, it's good to have. You know, but it's really not a great game. Now, what's funny about it is that I didn't know that there was a Nintendo version of this game until about 2002, when I first got a Nintendo emulator and I saw it as one of the games listed, because I never saw this in stores. What sold a lot better was the Game Boy version, and this one I had. This one I had when it first came out, and it's pretty much the same game as the Nintendo version, just in black and white. But there's two less wrestlers. They took out Undertaker and Bam Bam Bigelow for the Game Boy version, but the other 8 are still in there. It plays decent. It's the same exact game. So, and I have to admit that both of these, while it's a good collection to have, it's not the greatest. It's not the best way to really end the Nintendo era, for sure. But overall, I would have to say, if you just want it for your collection, it's good. It's definitely good to have. I mean, what's interesting is that up until the Legends of WrestleMania game that came out 16 years after this, I mean, you got Hogan and Yokozuna in the game together, so you can relive the match where Yokozuna crushed Hogan. And you could have, you know, Bret Hart and Bigelow in the King of the Ring finals. So, I mean, little things like that, if you're like a completist and want to do it, it's fine. But otherwise, not the best to recommend, for sure. So, bye-bye 8-bit era. We say goodbye to the 8-bit era, but the Game Boy wasn't even close to being done. We had a lot more games. We had a few more games coming out to this, which we'll cover in our one of our next installments for sure. But that is King of the Ring. And for that, that's another edition of Retro Chronicles. I'm Slick D Gamer, and everybody, all of you, take care.